Welcome back to the Rules Plus podcast. I know, it's been a while. I'm a multi-sport official, so after busy basketball and baseball seasons, I'm looking forward to resuming weekly conversations with you who can't get enough insight into NCAA football rules, interpretations, and mechanics. For those of us who officiate Texas high school football, our interest in NCAA rules is more than casual, since the games we work are played under college rules with only slight modifications. As Yogi Berra would put it, even though it's just mid-May, it's getting late early for our preparation for the upcoming season. For the Austin Football Officials Association, our formal program of training, continuing education, and study begins in barely a month from now. Before we know it, the season will be here. So it's past time to get ready. If you've just joined our 2024 rookie class of the AFOA, or perhaps you've just discovered this podcast, let me explain that the purpose is to supplement and extend the deep dive into the complexities of NCAA football rules that we do during our in-season Rules Plus discussions prior to our weekly AFOA meetings. I am Michael Barrett, beginning my 47th season in football and 18th season in the referee position, and I have been moderating our Rules Plus study sessions for over a decade. Here's where I see the podcast going, heading into the 2024 high school football season. In the 12 weeks between now and August, I invite you to join me in reviewing each week one of the 12 chapters of the Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules. I'm starting today with Chapter 1, the Introduction. I'll be referring to the 2023 edition initially until I secure my copy of the 2024 edition. Perhaps the indispensable resource for football-specific rule study, the Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules, that's its formal title, is now published by George Demetrio, a 1969 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy and retired Army officer. Mr. Demetrio is past president of the Colorado Football Officials Association and serves as the rules interpreter for the state of Colorado. He has been a contributor to Referee Magazine and has authored articles and books on basketball and baseball rules as well. Dr. Rogers Redding, who held a Ph.D. in physical chemistry from Vanderbilt University, began publishing his annual study guide in 1991 and for many years served as an instructor at officiating camps sponsored by the Texas Association of Sports Officials, the umbrella organization for the Austin Football Officials Association. Sadly, Dr. Redding passed away on April 7th, leaving a legacy of teaching and mentorship for college and high school officials across the country who mourn his loss. Dr. Redding's officiating career began in Texas. He officiated in the Southwest Conference from 1988 to 1993, having worked high school football for more than 3 decades in Texas. And he worked the referee position in the Southeastern Conference for nearly a decade after that. His postseason assignments include the 1999 SEC Championship, Florida versus Alabama, and 3 national championship games at the 1991 Orange Bowl, Colorado versus Notre Dame, 1993 Sugar Bowl, Alabama versus Miami, and 1998 Rose Bowl, Michigan versus Washington State. After retiring from officiating on field in 2004, Dr. Redding served as a technical advisor and instant replay official for the SEC before becoming the conference's coordinator of officials. Dr. Redding also served as the NCAA secretary and rules editor from 2008 to 2017. When he was named rules editor, he asked George Demetrio to assume authorship of the study guide manual, wanting to avoid potential conflicts of interest. So, what is the Writing Study Guide exactly? The 12 chapters and 218 pages of the 2023 edition of the Writing Study Guide for NCAA Football Rules. There's also a version that addresses National Federation rules, organizes discussion around relevant topics rather than simply plodding in sequence through Rules 1 to 12. The Writing Guide refers to this organizational approach as studying phases of the game rather than simply studying one rule at a time in isolation. I have found that such an approach to rules has been critical to empowering my crew and me to make accurate and timely decisions in the heat of the moment on the field, and I have been sharing that contextual approach in this podcast. As evidence of my approach, you may recall my two related series of episodes in 2023 about the odd places where rules live and rules separated at birth, which dwelt on how our on-field, in-the-moment decisions regarding play outcomes and foul enforcement depend crucially on our integrated knowledge of provisions from multiple rules locations. For example, in episode 4 last July, I illustrated that for a seemingly simple scenario, 5 of the 10 playing rules applied. The play was indeed simple. On 1st and 10, a defender is flagged for grabbing a receiver's face mask 12 yards downfield to prevent a completed pass. Okay, so here are the questions. What's the foul? How is it enforced? Are there multiple fouls? What options should we offer to the team that was offended? The episode illustrated that provisions in 5 rules applied in this case, comprising rules 2, 3, 4, 7, and 10. The discussion further identified 19 specific rule citations that applied in this case. So the reason for the popularity of the Writing Study Guide as a trusted and insight-rich learning resource is clear. I can't think of a better resource to share with you in this podcast as we prep for the fast-approaching 2024 season. The Writing Guide is available from Amazon, from the several officials equipment vendors, and from S distributors at Box 2537, Denton, Texas 76202, to name only a few. If you live and officiate in Texas, be sure you obtain the study guide for NCAA rules. Otherwise, if your interest is high school football, purchase the version that addresses NFHS football rules. So why is the Writing Study Guide so useful? The introductory information and remarks in Chapter 1 of the Writing Guide are worth noting because they serve essentially as a user's manual for getting the most out of our study time using the guide. I'll let Demetrio and Reddy speak for themselves about the scope, focus, and purpose of the study guide, and about how to best use the guide for productive study. First, here's George Demetrio. Quote, "This guide is certainly not meant to replace the rules book and indeed does not cover everything therein. However, the rules book is not a teaching manual, nor is it intended to be. The purpose in writing this study guide is to provide a clearly written reference work organized around phases of the game and overall topics of importance that can be used to learn the rules and to refresh veteran officials each season." End quote. You'll find that on page 1 of the 2023 edition. And here's Roger's Reading from his preface written in July 2011 with advice about learning, advice that certainly is generalizable for any purpose. His words illustrate why he is so revered as a teacher and mentor. I have abridged his text only slightly. Quote, "When someone tells me they study the rules, often what they really mean is they read the rules. Reading and studying are related, but they are definitely not identical. What's missing from this picture is writing, an extremely important part of studying. A very smart friend of mine frames it this way: if you read an idea, you rent it, but if you write the idea, you own it. Here are some steps that I encourage you to try when you have settled on a particular rule or portion of the rule book to study. 1. Read the rule. 2. Write it out in your own words, using words with which you are comfortable. 3. Explain the rule to someone else, especially someone who would not be expected to know it. If you can't explain a rule to someone else, then you don't really understand it yourself. 4. Make up play situations that illustrate the rule. Plays that you have personally seen, ones that have some chance of actually happening. Lots of folks love to play rulebook trivia by concocting outlandish plays, but I don't find this approach especially helpful." End quote. Dr. Redding's conviction that writing supports learning may strike young adults' ears in 2024 as old-fashioned or simply quaint, but I urge you to consider his advice. Like Dr. Redding, I'm a boomer whose experience with reading and writing dates well back before the digital age. I, too, hold a PhD in rhetoric, composition, and writing assessment with an undergraduate background in mathematics, so I, too, can urge you with some considerable authority to consider Dr. Redding's advice about the usefulness of writing and paraphrasing for yourself as a study aid. I can offer my own testimonial that writing working scripts for these Rules Plus episodes has helped me grow substantially in integrating my knowledge and insight concerning the rules, even after 46 seasons applying the rules for perhaps 600 Friday nights and countless Tuesday to Thursday afternoons. So, what's coming in the next episode? Consider yourself now properly introduced to getting reading for the coming season. I'm not so sorry for the pun. To preview the next 11 episodes, here are the 11 remaining chapters of the Reading Study Guide. Chapter 2, Recent Rules Changes. Chapter 3, The Kicking Game. Chapter 4, Scrimmage Requirements and Live Ball, Dead Ball. Chapter 5, The Passing Game. Chapter 6, The Running Game and Forward Progress. Chapter 7, The Clock and Extra Periods. Chapter 8, Major Fouls. Chapter 9, Scoring. Chapter 10, Substitution. Chapter 11, Penalty Enforcement. And Chapter 12, perhaps the most fun of all, Loose Ends and Other Stuff. Yes, that's the title of the chapter. I can give you a sniff of what we'll be covering next week concerning rules changes. Such discussion may be actually a bit premature in mid-May for two principal reasons. One, we will not yet have the input from preseason NCAA workshops for coaches and CFO officials, nor will we yet have bulletins and videos that often provide final updated wording or interpretations of changes. Two, we will not yet have input from the University Interscholastic League, in Texas anyway, about which, if any, of these changes will apply to Texas high school football. Indeed, most of the changes this year appear to be relevant to colleges more so than to Texas high schools. However, I'm going to list all the announced changes anyway, because they are of interest to us as fans watching Saturday games, if not as officials working on Friday nights. So there are 6. Rule 1411B, exception, coach-to-player communications. For FBS institutions only, the rule is, and the word they use is permissive, for the use of a communication device with one designated player on offense and one on defense. I find the choice of the term permissive to be interesting, emphasizing that using such a device is hardly mandatory. If you're a high school baseball umpire, I think you'll see that this rule change is akin to the change this year to allow the pitch-comm technology between the coach and the catcher. Rule 1411A, Exception 3, tablets for in-game video. This technology is now permissive for all NCAA football divisions, not just the big boys. Rule 335, 2-minute timeout. Imagine that. Mimicking the long-time practice of the NFL, college games will now have a clock stoppage at the 2-minute point of the second and fourth periods. I'm guessing officials will be sternly directed to not refer to this stoppage as a 2-minute warning. For the colleges, one major benefit is likely that the stoppage now provides a clearly conspicuous inflection point for converting to last 2 minutes timing rules, such as for first downs, fouls by teams ahead or behind, and 10-second runoffs. Rule 1243 about collaborative instant replay. That clearly does not apply to us in high school. Rule 9115, horse collar tackle. Protection has been expanded to include a ball carrier or potential passer inside the tackle box. And Rule 321B, use of instant replay after halftime intermission. Apparently, everything has to be resolved before halftime begins. I think it's pretty clear that two changes are the best candidates for the UIL to approve for high school play in Texas: the 2-minute timeout and the horse collar extended protection. There are also a couple of editorial changes that may be of interest to us in high school games. Anyway, I hope you'll make time to listen to next week's episode for discussion and speculation about these changes. In the meantime, consider commenting on these changes, perhaps speculating about why they're happening and whether you would welcome them or not on Saturdays and/or Friday nights. So here's my closing word. It feels good to be back in the saddle. The Rules Plus podcast is back for the long haul, certainly through the end of November and perhaps beyond. Remember, I'm a member of the Austin Football Officials Association, and we're open for new applicants right now. Our extensive training in the classroom, through Zoom, and with on-field experience begins in less than a month. If you'd like to learn more about us, contact us. You can email us at recruiting@afoa.ws, visit our website at www.austinfootballofficials.org, or call us at 512-298-2987. Until next time, have a great week.